Whoa! Oh, that is one big worm. Yo, what is up guys, this is Tyranic Swine here, and welcome to another game review. This time I am reviewing Mass Effect, a third-person sci-fi RPG that is set in 2183. Now, you play as a character called Commander Shepard, and you can basically create him any way you want since you can customize his character, either as a male human or a female human. And the story of the game is that you go to a human planet called Eden Prime to pick up a beacon that is of unknown origin of a long-lost alien species. But then the mission goes wrong, and then you have to basically find out that the one who sabotaged the whole mission is another alien called Saren. And you basically have to find out what he's up to, since he is in league with the Geth and a Reaper, which is a giant synthetic life form. And you have to find out what his plans are, and when you do, you find out that he wants to destroy all of humanity in some way. And basically you go around the galaxy recruiting people on your ship to then stop him, and of course basically going around the entire galaxy trying to stop him from accomplishing this mission. It's pretty much the whole gist of the game, as this Mass Effect is a really big game. There is a lot of side missions, a lot of main missions, and there's a lot of characters too. And these characters, compared to many other games I've played, are actually really interesting and have a lot of backstory in them. I'll give this game a lot of credit because it actually does its characters very well. As you don't just have human characters to interact with, you also have alien characters to interact with too. And you have like 6 teammates on your ship that you can choose from. You can have 2 squad members at a time on a mission as well. You have 2 human characters, a Krogan, an Asari, a Quarian, and a Turian as your teammates. And honestly, all of these characters are done very well. You get to know more about their backstories, what sort of powers they have on the missions when you take them, and their whole view on the mission as a whole, really. And so yeah, it's not just them, there's also a lot of other unique characters within this game that are also around, like some like Captain Anderson, the Council, a lot of characters that you'll find on the planets like Pharos and Novaria. There is a lot of interesting characters that are around throughout the game, including the villains themselves, who also have a hidden agenda up their sleeve when it comes to helping out the Reapers, or Reaper since it's just one. In this game, you also have a dialogue wheel, which is when you are having a conversation with an interactive NPC, and either they will give you a mission to do, which you can then complete for them, and you can either earn the Paragon or Renegade points. Now, Renegade means you're basically being an arsehole in this game, and Paragon, you're basically being a good guy. Now, you can actually turn down these missions, which if you want to, which can, as Shepard, if you're a Renegade, you can then just turn down the mission and be an arsehole. And each of these decisions you make can impact the game as a whole and the later games that are in the future, and I think this is a really cool system. And plus, some things aren't possible unless you have a certain amount of Renegade or Paragon, so you better make sure you are basically grinding to make sure you have as much Paragon or Renegade as possible, to make sure that some decisions don't end up the way that you don't want them to be. And there is excuse me, there is some missions or choices in this game where you need to make a decision for some characters, and that can be quite challenging at times. Well, not challenging, but quite difficult, because it's like you've spent a lot of the time with these characters in the game, and you pretty much don't want to make a bad decision on who you don't want to leave or anything. So yeah, overall there is a lot of character development in this game. You see more backstory, they explain more about their own species, give you more of the lore of the universe, which is really cool, and there's a lot of other characters which give you more information about their own kind. So yeah, there is a lot of character development and a lot of conversational plot points in this game, and it has a really good and interesting story. Now, there is main missions and side missions throughout this game. There is like at least 4 or 5 main missions coupled alongside with a lot of side missions. The main missions are on certain planets like Theros, Noveria, Vermeer, Ilos, and then you have side missions that are on a lot of other planets. Now when you go down to these planets, when you do find them, you have a certain amount of space to explore. And you have your all-terrain vehicle, which is the Mako, or Mako, or whatever how you pronounce it. But of all the vehicles in games I've played, this is a very difficult vehicle to control, because even though this is a tank, it moves around like a goddamn remote control car, meaning it's very difficult as hell to control. And especially since you can basically try and climb up mountains and stuff in it, it can be quite difficult at times just to try and get up a giant hill with it sometimes, which is where an objective is. And yeah, and it's bouncy as hell, like literally the smallest jump could probably end up throwing you in lava or a deep pit or something. But fighting against enemies is very useful. Now when you go to these planets, you will find certain little objectives like anomalies, debris, which will give you like items, and you have just like a sort of a side mission in general. And of course there will be enemies to fight, it just depends. Now these side missions can take a while to do, as some side missions vary over others. Some will take longer to do, while some will be done straight away. Some can be found on certain places too. Like the Citadel, you'll always want to go back there for when you need to find more side missions, because the Citadel is sort of like your go back to place where there's always more missions to do at certain points in time. And of course there's the other systems around the galaxy that you can explore and see what's going on. And these side missions can be quite interesting to do. The problem is that some parts of the game are quite repetitive with their level design, which is especially with the side missions themselves. Like the main missions like the Citadel, Theros, Noveria, Vermeer, Ilos, those places look amazing for their level design because they're actually places, well, they're main plot points of the game. But the side quests are a little bit different. Like for example, the planets that you go to are usually barren and empty, and the only difference is the environment. Like that's pretty much it. There's no trees, no bushes, no nothing really. It's just flat land with just a different amount of mountains and hills, and it can be quite boring sometimes exploring these planets. And hell, even going to the the structures can be samey too. There's 3 different variations. There's like a research base, an underground facility, or a mine. And these, whenever you find these, they're always the same, except with a few little tiny differences in the amount of stuff that's in there, like boxes and stuff. And so yeah, the main missions, well, not the main missions. The main missions are done very well in this game. It's the side missions that can be quite repetitive in this game. But luckily, the main missions in this game are done particularly well. And luckily, because otherwise this game would be pretty damn boring and quite annoying to get through. But luckily the side missions can be quite fun to do. It's just the repetitiveness of the interior and exterior designs, like the planets and the buildings. But the missions themselves aren't really that boring. They can be quite interesting. Hell, there's even a few missions given from your squad mates like Garrus and Rex, who give you like an item to retrieve or to find someone so that they can kill, and you can then change their view on life or something like that. And so yeah, but the side missions can be quite interesting, but it's just they're quite repetitive with their design, and it can be at times. It's like gets kind of boring. Now, the combat and mechanics of this game is quite different from your usual type of games, but this is quite popular in RPGs. To start with, you can customize your character at the beginning of the game, and there is multiple classes to choose from, like Soldier, Adept, Vanguard, Infiltrator, Sentinel, and Engineer. And all of these have their own powers, strengths, and disadvantages. As soldiers are able to use every type of weapon in the game, while the other classes can only use like 1 or 2 at a time, depending on how quickly you unlock it. The soldier is the one I preferably use because usually I'm more of a weapon kind of guy, and I rely more on my teammates when it comes to the powers. Each classes have their own specific types of powers and techniques, and these can all be very useful at times, depending on what the enemy and the situation requires. Like, for example, if you're up against Geth, you want to take someone who has tech abilities, like Sabotage, Overload, or Dampening, which are very useful against the Geth. Or if you're going up against more organic type enemies, like Mercenaries, Pirates, or even Asaris, which are the biotic enemies too, it's more or less best to take a guy who is, or a teammate who is in the biotic power spectrum, or a combination of both tech and biotic powers, which is very useful, like Throw, Lift, Singularity, Stasis. These are all very useful for basically controlling your opponents and knocking them away from you so that they don't get in your face. As there is also melee type enemies too, and they're easily killed depending on your skill set. Now there is a lot of weapons in this game. Well, I say a lot of weapons, there is a lot of weapons to choose from, but the weapon designs, like, there's very little in the amount of weapon designs that there is. And, excuse me, I was a little disappointed. With the amount of weapon variation, or weapon designs. There was like probably at least 2 weapon designs for each weapon type, and all they would do was just give them a different color of just to make them look different, and I thought it was a little bit lazy, to be honest, and it was quite disappointing. And then there's the inventory system. Now the inventory system can be quite a pain to sort through, especially when you're trying to give each of your teammates better gear, as you have like the different weapons, you can give them upgrades and upgrade your armor, and even upgrade the Omni tools, which is for the tech abilities, and the biotic amps, which is for the biotic powers, which some classes and characters will have. And it's always best to upgrade yourself and your characters along the way, because by the end of the game you'll pretty much be an unstoppable maniac. But when you're playing this game on the hardest difficulty, it's always best to make sure that you take note of what your teammates and yourself are using, because this game does rely a lot on strategy, and you really do need to make sure you know what your opponents are, otherwise you're going to get your ass kicked. So you got to make sure you know what their weaknesses are and what powers are best against them. Not only that, you can also use a weapon wheel, where you can see which powers you and your teammates have, and then you can see what the powers are, and then you can basically use them. Basically time will stop, so you can basically lock onto your opponents so that the selective power can be used against them. I really did like the combat in this game. You can take cover, but it's not as decent compared to games like Gears of War, but it does improve later on in the other Mass Effect games. So overall I'd say the combat and the customization is okay. The customization of your weapons, could have been, the weapon designs could have been a little bit better, and the customization of your armor is actually pretty decent. There's a nice amount of variation. There's light, medium, and heavy armors, and depending on which class you are, you can only have a certain type of armor. And it's the same for your squad mates too. So yeah, the combat and the customization of characters is done fairly well, but could be improved upon a little bit.
Get some attention.
Now, there is a large amount of enemies in this game. There's basically splits between either organic type enemies, creatures, monsters, and synthetic enemies, like the Geth, Mercenaries, Pirates, and of course Rachni, which you do encounter at some point in the game. There is a nice large amount of enemy variation, especially for the Geth, as there is a lot of Geth types. You have the Geth Troopers, Snipers, Shock Troopers, Rocket Troopers, Destroyers, Juggernauts, Geth Primes, Geth Stalkers. There is a lot of Geth variations in this game. Since they're the only synthetic enemies in this game, of course they're going to need a lot of variation. And then you have the Mercenaries and Pirates, which consist of humans, Asari, Turians, Solarians, Krogan. The Krogan can be a pain in the ass to fight at times because of certain powers. Each of these enemies have their own specific powers and weapons that will benefit themselves in the combat against you. So you need to make sure you know what powers they have and what their weaknesses are, as some enemies have weaker shields and less health compared to other enemies. So you need to really make sure you have a consistent team setup. You need to make sure you have 2 squad mates that work well together and against the enemies that you're going to be fighting against. And of course you need to rank them up too over time, as there is a ranking system, or a class ranking. You need to make sure when you level up, you need to make sure you level up the right power, which is the most effective one, and whether it'll benefit both yourself and the teammate themselves. And the level cap for this game is 60, and by then you still won't have enough. Overall, there won't be enough points to fill up all of the powers. But overall, I'd say the amount of variation of powers and well, not weapons, but powers in this game is quite expansive, along with the enemies too. And the enemies, depending on the situation, can be quite difficult to fight, especially with the amount of them that there is. But if you use a certain type of weapon or a certain type of power, you can effectively kill them quickly. And how much you've upgraded that power can also deal a huge amount of damage to them too, and help yourself as well. But some parts of the game you will find a bit difficult because you may have gone to an area that you're not the right level for yet, or the enemy is just too strong for you, or you're just not prepared for the situation. Luckily, you can save the game before you enter a structure or anything. As long as you're not in combat, you can pretty much save the game whenever you want, and that's always a good thing to do, especially when you're playing this game on the highest difficulty, because playing this game on Insanity is difficult as hell. Now, the length of this game, it is pretty damn long, and it gives you actually a lot of content for the amount of time that there is, which is about 30 hours. Well, that's how long it took me, because I know this game like the back of my hand. But if you're a newcomer or anything, it'll probably take you about at least 35, maybe 40 hours, depending on how well you know these games and which game types you like. But honestly, overall, I'd say this game does actually give you a lot of things to do, and a nice amount of enemy variation. A lot of weapons, customization, a lot of planets to explore too, which you can go to by controlling the Normandy. Well, you don't really control the Normandy, you just use the galaxy map and you go to a certain planet and then you go to it. So yeah, there is a lot of things to do in this game, and actually that is a really good thing for an RPG, since pretty much a lot of the things in this game are very interesting to do. Now, just a few more things to say. There's a few nitpicks in this game really for me, like the fact that some character designs in this game, like NPCs, have the same hairstyle but different colours, and it can be quite not very different. The way you can do the inventory system, the way that's done could have been done better, honestly. Like the way, instead of everything being stacked up and then having to sort through it to see which is better, it would be nice to find some way to categorize all that stuff, and it would have been very useful over time. Like I said before, the Maker was terrible to use. It's probably one of the worst vehicles ever to use in the game. But there is a lot of nice hidden things to find which can benefit you in a mission. Like there's a lot of interactional things, and they can either help out in the mission or probably get you killed. And then there's obviously the sort of smaller side quests where you just talk to a person and basically see what happens. There is also a few boss battles in this game, and these are actually quite interesting. They do take quite a strategy to do, since they do have enemies to help them. But yeah, the boss battles in this game are actually pretty interesting compared to most games that I've played that have boss battles in. These are actually pretty decent and actually quite challenging at times. Of course, then the choices that you make in this game will obviously go on to the next game. So those are just a few things I needed to say. And just a few more things about the characters of this game. These characters are voiced very well compared to a lot of other games I've seen in the past. This game is now almost 10 years old. In fact, it pretty much is 10 years old. And honestly, it still goes very strong, does this game. The characters are very well done compared to the games I've seen recently. Overall, the characters are just very fun. You get to know more about them, what their culture's like, and they're pretty much fun to talk to at times. Hell, they even have funny conversations in elevators at times, and I thought that was a really nice thing to put in. There's a lot of detail put into this game, and even though there is a few nitpicks for this game to me, or mostly overall, this is a very fun. It's a very fun game and it's a very fun adventure. Despite it does feel a little bit stiff in the fighting mechanics, overall I think this game has been done particularly very well. And I'm going to give this game a 9 out of 10. So, that is my review of Mass Effect. Of course, I'm going to be doing the other two Mass Effect games while I'm waiting for Mass Effect Andromeda to come out, which is why I'm doing these games now, as a sort of setup to Mass Effect Andromeda. But it's obviously going to be fun replaying these games. So, if you've enjoyed this review, leave a like down below, comment on what you think is right or wrong with the game, and then I shall see you guys in the next random video.